The end of the week arrives, and we've got another UFC fight on tap, UFC 127. Kevin Iole joins us to break down the
Hey,
event
Steve.
in Australia. Interesting card, and from a betting standpoint, though, not a card that I think has a lot of dogs, unless you like maybe BJ Penn in the main event.
Yeah, I mean, getting BJ Penn at plus money, Steve, I think is a really nice proposition anytime. I mean, BJ is one of the great fighters of all time, and you can get him at plus $1.60. I think that's pretty good value. Tough, I think a tough spot for BJ in that fight. He had a difficulty with a wrestler in Frankie Edgar. BJ is legendary for his takedown defense, but can he keep himself upright against John Fitch? I think that fight breaks down. If BJ keeps it standing, he wins the fight. He wins it fairly handily. I think if Fitch manages to take him down and get top position, I think BJ's in big trouble. So I think it's kind of a pretty clear-cut fight, and we should know fairly early on how it's going to go.
So that said, from a betting standpoint, should John Fitch be almost a 2-to-1 favorite? He's minus 190. As we mentioned, BJ is plus 160. Will Fitch get top control? I mean, is it that strong a possibility that he's going to get him down and then be able to hold him down?
I think that number is based on the second fight with George St. Pierre. I really do. I think that, we saw the two Frank Edgar fights, but it wasn't like Edgar was repeatedly taking him down, holding him down. In the second fight, he did take him down quite a bit. But Frankie did a good job of mixing everything up. But I think in that George St. Pierre fight, the size really was a big difference. BJ was just not big enough and strong enough to compete with a guy like George St. Pierre at that point. And I think that would be why the number is what it is, because they're looking at the St. Pierre fight and saying, well, Fitch is a similarly good wrestler, maybe for functional MMA, he's just a notch behind GSP. I think as an amateur wrestler, a better wrestler probably, but as a functional MMA wrestler, clearly I think, GSP would have the advantage. But that being said, Steve, I think that size and strength in that particular instance are why the number is skewed the way it is, and Fitch's record. I mean, you look at Fitch's form: 13-1 in the UFC. BJ's 1-2 in his last three outings. You just look at that, and it's hard not to like Fitch.
So BJ's hope is to keep it on the feet and hope that Fitch wants to slug it out a little bit. Is there a chance that John Fitch is feeling the pressure a little bit of 5 straight decision wins? That, not that it's an awful thing, but we know he's been passed over for title shots for that reason. There could be some big things on the way. Is he going to go out and feel pressure to go and finish the fight? And maybe that's on the feet.
I mean, there's always that possibility, but I just think Fitch is too seasoned. And, if he was going to do that, he would have done it against Thiago Alves, and he did not. I think that it would have been a really exciting fight. And, you stand with Thiago Alves, and, you're taking a big risk, but it's also, an entertaining fight. I mean, and if Fitch wanted to do that, I think that would have been the one. He was getting some heat going into that fight. I just think Fitch is a guy that, he's pretty mentally tough, and he knows what his game plan is. He knows what he has to do. And, I think the one thing that you might see him do is be a little more active when he's on the bottom. On the top when he has BJ underneath him. But, against a guy like BJ Penn, who is so great at jiu-jitsu, you're risking a lot there. You want to get that position where you minimize his opportunity to submit you.
Your official pick on the fight?
I like John Fitch to win. I think it's going to be a decision. I think everything I see is going to indicate that this fight's going to go the entire way. I would pick Fitch by decision. I would not fall out of my chair shocked if BJ were to pull it off, but I think that Fitch kind of makes sense here in this spot, and I think he's going to pull the win out.
I think it's an even fight. I think from a betting standpoint, you get a little value with BJ Penn. I think he'll either find a way to keep it standing the entire time, learning from his fights against GSP. Or I think the other thing, it'd be crazy to see a submission pulled off, but he could do it. John Fitch does work a lot from full guard, so I'm going to roll on plus 160 with BJ Penn. Michael Bisping takes on Jorge Rivera. Been a lot of talk going into this one, mostly from the Rivera side, and I think it's worked to a certain extent. I don't know if it's going to backfire on him. Bisping is over a 3-to-1 favorite at minus 320, and Rivera's coming back at plus 240. Jorge Rivera's an older guy, though. Is there a little phoniness to this matchup where we're buying into the hype and not respecting Michael Bisping?
I think Michael Bisping's the better overall fighter. I just Rivera's a striker, and could he land a shot? Yeah, I think he could. I mean, in this game, anything is possible. But the odds really, would tell you, and logic would tell you that Bisping is the more complete fighter, the better overall fighter. He's beaten better guys. Bisping does not get a lot of respect, but look at his record. I mean, the disputed decision with Rashad Evans, the Vanderlei Silva fight last year in Australia. I mean, the fights that he's lost have been right there. I mean, Bisping is, except for the Dan Henderson fight, not a guy you blow out. And, the Dan Henderson fight, one of those things. I mean, Henderson was the better fighter that night and probably would win, the majority of the times those two fight. But I think it was exaggerated in on that one, where the difference between them looks greater than it probably really is. If they fought 10 times, Henderson might win 7 or 8. But I think Bisping would make them all a lot closer than he did UFC 100.
I would. I'm not going to bet this at 320, but to me, this is almost like a 4 or 5 to 1 favorite fight. I think Bisping wins any way he wants to. If he keeps it standing, I think he's going to peck him to death from the outside. And I think Michael Bisping's better on the ground. I think Rivera's been rewarded here with a nice fight because of service to the UFC, and it's a nice story. But I don't see how he wins the fight.
Nor do I. I mean, the fact. You have a striker that's plus 250 as he is. I suppose that there's a little bit of value because, as I said before, it just takes one punch, and you catch somebody cold, you catch them in an odd situation, and you can put them out. But when you have Bisping with so many different advantages, I think Bisping's a cool customer. I don't think he's going to get himself rattled. And I think all this talk, I don't think he likes it. I know he's he's legitimately angry about it, but I don't think it's going to throw him off the game plan at all, Steven. So I would anticipate Michael Bisping perform very well, and I would say a stoppage in the second half of the fight or a decision victory.
George Sotiropoulos is back home. Quick turnaround, about 13 weeks since his victory against Joe Lozon. He's minus 330. He's going against Dennis Siver. Now, when you say striker, to me, Dennis Siver is a striker. I don't really...
Kickboxer, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who can, maybe not so much with the hands, but I think he has more finishing power and can pull an upset. He's also going against maybe a better caliber fighter in George Sotiropoulos versus where Bisping is at middleweight. I know you're a big George fan.
I think George is a phenomenal overall fighter. I really do. I mean, I think that when you look at his game, he's got terrific jiu-jitsu. He boxed a few times professionally. I think his boxing is more than adequate, and he's got very solid wrestling. I think he's a very smart guy. There's very few fighters in the UFC that are more well-conditioned than he is. I think he's got a lot of stuff going for him. He proved last year against Joe Daddy Stevenson in Australia that he can handle the pressure of fighting at home. And I think the same thing applies in this fight that we said about the Bisping-Rivera fight. Siver is a good kickboxer. He's a good striker. Hey, you catch one on the button. I think, he could get the home run, but that's very unlikely. That's like asking the Pittsburgh Pirates to win 70 games. I mean, it's, something you're probably not going to see happen.
And Sotiropoulos on the ground just has a huge advantage. Standing up, I think George can be hit, and maybe that's where the upset chance comes in. But once he gets to the ground, and I don't know that Siver has great takedown defense, George is just an animal, and he doesn't just go down there to lay and pray and improve position. He goes to finish.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, I think once they hit the ground, I think you start your stopwatch. How long is it going to be before George Sotiropoulos submits him? And I would be willing to bet that, it's no more than 90 seconds. Once George gets him off his feet, where they stay down for, more than just a couple seconds, the Seaver doesn't just immediately scramble up. Pick your stopwatch up, get it going, because you're going to be coming down to George Sotiropoulos' victory.
A couple of undercard fights we wanted to take a look at. Number one, I know you were intrigued by the odds in the Spencer Fisher Ross Pearson fight. Pearson, I think, was a guy who was kind of a high riser, but ran into some troubles recently. And Spencer Fisher is one of those guys. I don't know, is he at the tail end of his career? I'm not sure. He's definitely a card filler, but he comes hard every fight and brings it. And he's actually a dog in this fight against the Brit.
He's fought a number of those really good mid-level guys, and he's competed fairly successfully in that realm. And I just think I think he's a better overall fighter than Ross Pearson. I know Pearson had a lot of push behind him, a lot of hype on him. I was never really sold that much on Ross. His last outing, I wasn't surprised at all that he dropped it. And I just think Fisher's a good play in this spot. I think it's a close fight. It's a 52-48, 51-49 type fight for me. But you're getting the plus money, Spencer Fisher, excuse me. I like Spencer to win the fight.
All right, so Fisher's plus 120, like you said, and Pearson is minus 150. There's one other fight to mention, just because there's some names there. Chris Tucker is loosely aligned with Brock Lesnar from his camp, and I know you were questioning why Mark Hunt is fighting again. I guess it's the old contractual obligation. He did not look good his first time out against Sean McCorkle. Hunt in this fight is actually plus 210.
I want to meet the guy that negotiated Mark Hunt's contract because how many guys that are good fighters get cut from the UFC? They're good fighters. They come in shape. They come to fight hard, and they get cut from the UFC after a loss. This guy was, out of shape when he fought at UFC 119. I mean, what did he really do? He got destroyed by a guy like McCorkle that you mentioned. I mean, McCorkle is yet to be proven. I think he got a lot of notoriety based on winning his fight over Mark Hunt. But I mean, let's be fair here. Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt's no Chris Tucker, let alone Brock Lesnar. And I just don't understand what the heck is he doing in the UFC. And whoever negotiated that contract, I think, is manager of the century.
All right, so no value on Hunt, but he is a winner already because he got another fight with the UFC.
Yeah, I guess it's because it's in the Pacific Rim that he's there. Mark is from New Zealand. I can't think of any other. Honestly, I cannot think of a reason why he's on that card. Other than if in fact it is that they're contractually obligated to get him, and God bless his manager because his manager did a terrific job. If it's not, and they just put him on, the UFC doesn't make a lot of mistakes in terms of things like this, Steve. But I think this is a big one that they made, putting this goofball on the card, and I just don't get it.
Thanks, Kev. I hope we got a couple of winners we brought in there.
Thank you, Steve. Good job.
Don't forget, folks out there viewing this, you can check Yahoo on the front page of the MMA page. If you cannot get to a television, you can buy the pay-per-view and watch it right here on Yahoo Sports. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.